Welcome to Starbound. My name's the Voice Ogre, and I'll be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new stories of Sunspire Academy, which I happen to do, and Freyren and Rimiki. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes and future series, tap Join below to become a Starbound member. Now, let's get into today's story. The joke started before anyone noticed the punchline was already in the room, polishing the floor.
And then the human says, "We need more duct tape."
Crickstar wheezed, his tentacles rippling. The Cephalori's impression of a human accent, a gurgling, syrupy, drowning sound, sent the packed lecture hall into fits of mirth. Hall G9 was crammed with the galaxy's brightest, all here for the academic roasting of humanity.
They strapped themselves to controlled explosions,
Zayla added, her translucent skin flickering with condescending amusement.
They call it rocket science, as if it required intelligence. My clutch mother said they poison themselves recreationally,
A Gravari chimed in.
They call it coffee.
The insults flew, a comfortable chorus of superiority. No one paid any mind to the janitorial unit in the corner. It was an M7 scrubber, an obsolete model known for its noisy inefficiency. It was a piece of technology as primitive as the species they were mocking, endlessly buffing the same spot on the floor with a low, monotonous whir. It was background, less noticeable than a piece of furniture.
Their planet is 70% water, and they evolved to drown in it. Stupid humans.
The whirring stopped. The sudden silence was more jarring than an alarm. Every eye, compound and simple, swiveled to the corner. The M7 scrubber, which had been hunched over its task, slowly straightened. The movement wasn't the smooth, silent glide of a modern machine. It was a series of grinding creaks and metallic groans, the sound of stressed metal and protesting servos. It sounded old, sounded pained. The unit's single optical sensor, a dim red light, swiveled to face the student who had just spoken. Then, with a sharp thunk that made several students jump, a maintenance panel on the machine's chest unlatched and swung open. It wasn't a sleek, automated hatch. It looked like someone had kicked it open from the inside. From the dark cavity, a hand emerged. Scarred, calloused, and unmistakably human. It gripped the edge of the opening, knuckles white. A second hand joined it. With a grunt of effort, a man pulled himself out of the machine's chassis, his worn boots hitting the pristine floor with a soft thud. He was wrapped in clothes that had seen better decades, and he brushed dust from his jacket that couldn't possibly exist on a station with molecule-sized air filters. He stood there for a moment, letting the horrified silence stretch until it became a physical presence in the room. He looked at the student who'd made the drowning joke. His voice was quiet, conversational, yet it carried across the entire hall.
It's a valid point. We're not natural swimmers.
He began to walk towards the lecturer's podium, his steps deliberate. But we learned. We built boats to conquer the surface and submarines to conquer the depths. We looked at a fundamental weakness and turned it into a recreational activity, a source of food, a strategic advantage. He set a duffel bag down on the podium. The thud was the only sound. He pulled out a folder held together with the galaxy's favorite punchline, silver duct tape. We are the only species to look at something that could kill us and ask, "How can I use this?" He looked up, and his eyes, the color of old concrete, swept the room. They weren't angry. They were worse. They were analytical. Which, incidentally, is the subject of this course. He finally allowed himself a thin, humorless smile that didn't reach his eyes.
I am Professor Reed. I will be your instructor for this intensive workshop on human psychology.
The silence in the room curdled. The lesson had already begun. They had been caught mocking a human who had been hiding inside a piece of primitive machinery 10 feet away from them the entire time, patiently listening. The implications of that, the cunning, the sheer audacity, the alien way of thinking, were far more terrifying than any weapon. Aurelian in the third row, feathers bristling, found their voice.
This is unorthodox. How can you ensure objective instruction on the subject?
Reed's smile could have been mistaken for friendly, if you thought baring teeth was how humans showed joy instead of how they showed options. Who better to teach you about a dangerous world than the dangerous creature who evolved from it? He tapped the duct-taped folder. We adapt. We observe. We get inside your systems by being the thing that you've already decided isn't worth looking at. He turned to the holographic board. Now, let's begin with Lesson 1, the strategic benefits of being underestimated. Silence, the kind that usually preceded extinction events. Reed unpacked his folder, revealing handwritten notes. Several students gasped. Handwritten, like a barbarian. Like someone who'd never heard of neural transcription or thought-to-text interfaces. Like someone who chose to make marks on processed plant matter with colored stick water.
But the course description
Says ancient species, a psychological study taught by the foremost expert on human behavioral patterns. Reed looked up, gray eyes sweeping the room like searchlights looking for intelligent life. Congratulations, you found him. The same Raelian student spoke.
This is absurd. How can you teach about human psychology objectively when you are a human?
Reed's smile could have been mistaken for friendly if he had never seen a predator before. If you'd been raised by herbivores on a planet where the apex predator was a slightly aggressive mushroom. Same way you teach about intelligence, despite demonstrably lacking in it. We adapt. The Raelian's feathers went from bristled to molting. Someone whispered, "Thermal burn detected," in Galactic Standard. "Now," Reed continued, pulling out a marker. An actual ink-based writing implement that probably violated several hazardous materials protocols, and turning to the holographic board. "Let's start with why everything you think you know about humans is filtered through fear, ignorance, and bad comedy. Question 1. If humans are so inferior, how did we survive 3 extinction events that wiped out half the species in this room?" Nobody raised a hand, or tentacle, or a psionic emanation. The silence grew teeth. No volunteers? Shocking. Let me help. Krigstar, your species achieved spaceflight 4,000 years ago. It's impressive. How many times has your homeworld been rendered uninhabitable? None. Cute. Earth has been knocked back to the Stone Age 3 times. Twice by asteroids, once by ourselves. Each time, we crawled out of the ashes, looked at the ruins of everything that we'd built, and said, let's try that again, but different. Your species builds bunkers. We build better ideas. He wrote on the board, Cognitive Apex. The letters appeared in his jagged handwriting, somehow more threatening than any font. You measure evolution by technology. We measure it by adaptation. You evolve from predators or prey. We evolve from both. Then, we evolve past the whole system. Sayla's hand shot up.
That's illogical. Evolution doesn't work.
On purpose? Reed interrupted. You're right. Evolution doesn't work on purpose. Unless you're a species that invented purpose. He tapped the board. We didn't evolve to be stronger or faster. We evolved to look at stronger, faster things and say, I bet that'd taste good with salt. Nervous laughter. Different this time. Uncertain.
But, Professor...
Another student ventured. a Varthon whose bioluminescent patches flickered with uncertainty.
Humans are known for violence, for war. Your history is soaked in blood. That's not evolution, that's...
History, Reed finished. Every species in this room has a history of violence. The difference? You hid from yours. And we wore ours like a terrible sweater from a relative we couldn't throw away. Ugly, comfortable, but undeniably ours. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a battered tablet, probably older than some civilizations. The screen had been cracked and repaired with, of course, clear tape. Your required reading says that humans are psychologically unstable. I prefer psychologically flexible. Thicole's tentacles writhed in what might have been indignation or fear.
This is highly irregular. The curriculum clearly states that...
The curriculum was written by species who'd never seen a human city at night. Never watched us turn deserts into gardens. Never understood why we name our storms or talk to machines or apologize to furniture when we bump into it. Reed walked to the center of the room. Every eye, compound or simple, tracked him. He returned to the board, drew a circle. Inside it, he wrote, Lesson 1. Let's start with something simple. Quick start. Tell me about cephaloid humor. What makes your species laugh? The tentacled student shifted uncomfortably.
Incongruity, subverted expectations, the failure of others to adapt to obvious patterns.
So, you laugh at things that don't fit? At things that fail to conform, Reed nodded. Now tell me why you were laughing at humans. The silence that followed had texture. Weight? Possibly its own gravitational field.
Because...
Quickstar started, then stopped. Started again.
Because humans don't fit our patterns.
Bingo! Reed pointed with his marker. You laugh at us because we scare you. We don't follow your rules. We don't fit your categories. We survive things that should kill us, fail at things that should be easy, and succeed at things that should be impossible. We're your species' worst nightmare. Chaos with a graduation certificate. A Zenthron in the back raised one of their forehands.
But surely chaos is inferior to order. The galaxy runs on predictable systems, established protocols, and...
The galaxy runs on illusions of control. Reed interrupted. You've had spaceflight for a millennia. We've had it for 2 centuries. You're still using the same drives that your ancestors invented. We have gone through many different propulsion methods because someone got bored. He pulled up a holographic display. Not through neural interface or gesture control. He actually touched the projector with his finger, like an animal. The image showed a human spacecraft, if it could be called that. It looked like someone had duct-taped a tin can to a bomb and added windows as an afterthought. Apollo 11, the spacecraft that put humans on our moon. Look at it. Really look at it. The computational power of this entire vehicle was less than what your species uses to order lunch. The heat shielding was literally glued on, by hand, by humans who knew that one imperfection would mean people burning alive on re-entry. The image shifted. 3 humans in bulky suits, grinning like they'd won the lottery. These 3 idiots, they sat on top of enough explosives to level a city, aimed themselves at a rock with no atmosphere, and went anyway. You know why? Nobody answered. Because someone bet us we couldn't. He killed the projection, faced the glass. For the next few weeks, you're going to learn about human psychology. Not the sanitized version in your textbooks. Not the comedy routine you've been rehearsing. The real thing. Fair warning, you won't like it.
Why?
Thictal asked, though his voice suggested they already suspected. Because by the end you will realize that you've been laughing at the wrong things. You'll understand why humans are the only species to invent horror as entertainment. He gathered his materials. The class sat frozen, processing. Oh, And your first assignment, Reed added, almost as an afterthought. Write a 5,000-word essay on this question. If humans are so stupid, why are you all trying so hard not to be like us? He headed for the door, then paused. And Crickstar, the next time that you do a human impression, remember, we think it's funny too. The difference is, we're laughing at you, laughing at us. It's called meta-humor. We, kind of invented it. The door squealed shut behind him. In the silence that followed, 912 of the galaxy's brightest students sat with the uncomfortable realization that they had just been academically mugged by a species they'd considered barely sapient. Zayla was the first to speak. Did anyone notice he never told us where he got his degree?
Or his qualifications?
Victol added weakly. From the back of the room, a small voice, belonging to a usually silent Mirren, spoke up. Did anyone else notice he knew all our names without checking the roster? The silence returned. This time it brought friends. The second day began with a tension you could calibrate. The Vathan conflict tree, Melgris announced, represents the pinnacle of dispute resolution technology. Observe. The holographic projection bloomed like a firelight in a prism factory. Branches of light sprawled across the lecture hall, each node pulsing with algorithmic certainty. Colors shifted based on calculated probabilities, emotional weight matrices, and something called grievance quantification that had won its inventor a Nobel equivalent. By assigning mathematical values to each party's concerns, Malgris continued, we eliminate the chaos of emotion. War becomes impossible when all outcomes are pre-calculated. Violence becomes illogical when its cost is quantified. The display showed conflict after conflict, resolved through pure mathematics. Border disputes solved by an algorithm. Resource allocation determined by a formula. Even cultural disagreements were reduced to numerical values and processed into solutions. Reed sat on his desk, boots dangling like a kid at a dock. Half the glass had needed atmospheric filters. The other half of the class had developed what could only be described as morbid curiosity about human dietary choices. Beautiful system, he said, still chewing. The sound was audible across 8 different audio spectrums. How long did the calculation take before the Varthan-Sulik border dispute? Melgris shrugged. 7 to 3 cycles? But the prevention of warfare was worth. The Suliks invaded on cycle 74, Reed said. They got bored. Reed continued, standing. A piece of jerky hung from the corner of his mouth like the universe's worst toothpick. Your tree computed every logical outcome, except one where someone said, screw it, and flipped the board. That's not how conflict resolution works, Melgrith said. That's exactly how conflicts work when one party doesn't agree to your rules. Reed walked up to the hollow display, still chewing. You want to see humanity's conflict resolution tree? Without waiting, he pulled up a grainy historical photo. Soldiers, mud, horror painted in sepia tones that somehow made it worse. The kind of image that made you understand why humans invented therapy. December 24th, 1914. Earth. Middle of what we called the Great War. Although we'd later need to number them to keep them straight. Nervous shifting around the room. Germans on one side, British and French on the other. They'd been killing each other for months. It's not your clean, algorithmic conflict. No, this was mud and blood and boys crying for their mothers in languages their enemies didn't speak. Frost that killed as surely as bullets. Whatever hope sounds like when it dies. The class leaned forward despite themselves. Even Thakol's tentacles had stopped their constant motion. And then someone started singing. Silent Night, in German. Someone else sang it back, in English. And by morning, they were playing football in no man's land, sharing cigarettes that would kill them slower than bullets, trading addresses to mail letters to each other's families if they didn't make it home. Reed pulled up another image. Enemies laughing together, sharing drinks, being human in a place designed to strip humanity away. The generals were furious. They had to threaten to court-martial to get them to fight again. Some units had to be relocated because they refused to shoot at men that they'd shared Christmas with. Sailor's voice was smaller than usual. What algorithm produced that outcome? None. Reed's smile had edges sharp enough to cut glass. Just humans being simultaneously the worst and best versions of themselves. Your tree calculates peace. We stumbled into it, covered in mud and other men's blood. Because, somebody remembered it was Christmas. He brought up another display. Charts, graphs, all showing the same thing. Human unpredictability as a statistical anomaly. Every model you build assumes rational actors. Humans aren't rational. We're rationalizing. There's a difference. We do things and then we make up reasons afterward. We act on emotion and then we backfill with logic. We're chaos engines running on spite and caffeine. That's terrifying, someone whispered. Later that same day, after a tense lunch break, the Gravari reaction pool, Chevelle announced, moss rippling with confidence that came from millions of years of evolution. Ensures survival through biochemical optimization. When faced with extreme danger, our neurons flood with calm state enzymes. Panic becomes impossible. Fear becomes data. Emotion becomes irrelevant. They demonstrated with the simulation. A Gravari faced with imminent stellar collapse. Heartbeat steady. Decisions optimal. Survival achieved through pure, emotionless efficiency. The display showed neural activity as smooth as glass, untroubled by the chaos of feeling. In 17 million documented cases, Chevelle continued, the calm state has never failed. We have evolved beyond the primitive responses that plague lesser species. Several students glanced at Reed. He was building something out of paper clips. It looked either like a very small trebuchet or a very confused spider. Impressive, he said, not looking up. Tell me, Chevelle, what's the Gravari population growth rate? -2%, but that is due to optimization of resources. It's due to your species being too calm to get excited about making babies. Reed looked up, but we'll get back to that. Let me show you something. He pulled up his own visual. 3 humans in a tin can, surrounded by the nothing of space. The image quality was terrible, like someone had filmed it through a dirty window while drunk. Apollo 13. 3 humans in a vessel designed by the lowest bidder, held together by rivets and prayer. 200,000 miles from home when... The screen showed an explosion. Not the clean, colorful explosions of entertainment. This was ugly, mechanical, final. Oxygen tank explodes. They're venting air into space, power failing, carbon dioxide building. The ground control tells them, in technical speak, that they are going to die. You want to know what saved them? The calm state would have, Chevelle began, would have killed them. Reed interrupted. No, it saved them? Panic. Beautiful, chaotic, human panic. James Lovell's hands shaking so bad he could barely hold the checklist. John Swigert sweating through his shirt. Fred Hayes throwing up from stress and still calculating trajectories. He pulled up schematics. Duct tape, plastic bags, socks, a flight manual. Items that had no business being life-saving equipment. They literally held their air scrubber together with duct tape and underwear. You know why? Because panic plus creativity equals solutions too stupid to fail. Your calm state would have accepted death with dignity. But we told death to take a number and wait in line. That is not adaptation, Chevelle protested, moss darkening. That is luck. No. Reed's voice dropped to something between a whisper and a threat. Luck is finding water. Adaptation is learning to drink your own filtered piss and calling it Tuesday. Those 3 humans made it home because they were terrified enough to try anything and stubborn enough to make it work. He brought up statistics, survival rates, innovation indices, patents filed per capita. Humans create more when we're scared. We innovate more when we're desperate. We achieve the impossible when we're too panicked to realize it is impossible. Your calm state is death by another name. It's given up with extra steps. You're glorifying dysfunction, Chevelle said quietly. I'm explaining function, Reed countered. You've eliminated panic, right? Congratulations. You also eliminated the thing that made your ancestors climb out of the primordial soup in the first place. The thing that said, this isn't good enough, and the thing that drives evolution itself. Zayla couldn't take it anymore. You are romanticizing madness! She stood. Humans are contradictions. You claim empathy while building weapons. You preach peace while perfecting war. You are hypocrites. Reed didn't deny it. Didn't even flinch. He finished writing on the board. Something about cognitive dissonance, and turned around. You're absolutely right. The room stopped breathing. We are hypocrites. Reed pulled out a worn book. Paper, because of course. The cover was held on, nobody was surprised, by duct tape. Human named Walt Whitman wrote, Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. He set the book down with the kind of care usually reserved for religious artifacts or nuclear weapons. You know what we call a species that never contradicts itself? Extinct. We survive because we can hold 2 opposing ideas in our head and then use both. We can love our children and build bonds. We can look at our worst selves and still try to do better. That is insane, Zayla whispered. That is the point. Reed pulled up images. Mother Teresa and mushroom clouds. Einstein's equations and Auschwitz. Children's laughter and soldier screams. Beauty and horror, side by side, often in the same frame. We're not good or evil. We are both, always, at the same time. And that terrifies you, because you've spent so long pretending you were one or the other. He looked directly at her. Through her, maybe. Your species eliminated aggression through genetic modification 3 centuries ago. How is your border dispute with the Kellans going? Zayla's form flickered. They are negotiating. You're losing. Because they kept their aggression and they learned to control it. You threw away the weapon and you wondered why you couldn't fight? Aggression is primitive. Aggression is honest. Reed's voice could have etched glass. You didn't eliminate aggression. You buried it. Renamed it. Called it assertive negotiation or protective reasoning. But it's still there, festering under your crystalline surface. At least humans admit what we are. He pulled up a newsfeed. Current, local. Yesterday, a Valari trade delegate used aggressive negotiation tactics to secure mining rights in the Kellan system. 14 Kellan colonists were relocated for their safety. Want to see the footage? That is different. It's not. Reed killed the feed. It's the same thing with better PR. The difference is humans know that we are capable of atrocity. We teach our children about our failures. We build monuments to our victims, but you? You pretend you've transcended violence while perfecting it. At least we try to be better! Zayla snapped. No, Reed said quietly. You try to appear better. We try to be better. The next day, The Dean's visit. Dean Vexai entered like a storm prediction, inevitable and unwelcome. Their 6 arms moved in perfect synchronization, a dance of bureaucratic displeasure that had taken centuries to perfect. Each arm had its own PhD, its own opinion, and its own way of expressing disappointment. Professor Reed. Each word dripped academic condescension across 12 tonal registers. I have been reviewing your methods. Reed didn't look up from the essay he was grading, with a red pen, on paper. The scratching sound was audible across the hall, like fingernails on the chalkboard of academic propriety. If you hear about the complaint from the Zenthron student, they were upset I proved their species' perfect peace protocol caused 3 civil wars. You're romanticizing a deviant species. Now Reed looked up. No, I'm giving them a mirror. They're the ones falling in love with the reflection. These students represent the galaxy's finest. These students couldn't survive a week on pre-contact Earth. Reed stood. The desk creaked. They will die of exposure trying to figure out the optimal temperature setting. They would go mad trying to make sense of a world that doesn't care about their theories. Dean's form shifted through 3 offensive colors, and one that was illegal in 12 systems. You're teaching them to admire chaos. I'm teaching them to understand it. Reed's smile had too many teeth for comfort. Several students did quick calculations on human dental arrangements and came up disturbed. Want to sit in on today's class? We're covering human combat philosophy, and I promise that no one will get physically hurt. Physically? Well, emotionally is just harder to guarantee. Existentially is right out. The Dean's 6th arm made a gesture that translated roughly to, I have made a mistake but cannot admit it. Your methods are unorthodox. My methods are human, Reed shrugged. If you wanted orthodox, should have hired a Vulcan. A what? Never mind, it's a human joke, you wouldn't get it. He paused. Actually, that's today's lesson. Want to stay? The Dean departed with the kind of haste usually reserved for evacuations. Reed watched them go, then turned to the class. Right. Today we are discussing humor. Who can tell me why the Dean didn't get my Star Trek reference? Blank stares. Nobody? Good. That's the point. Humor can be warfare by other means. And humans, he grinned, we've weaponized laughter itself. On the final morning, it was Crickstar who spoke first. His tentacles nodded in thought.
I've been thinking,
Crickstar said. Tentacles nodded in what his species considered deep thought.
About the duct tape.
Reed looked up from his lunch. Oh?
It's not about the tape, is it? It's about the mindset that says, this will hold for now.
Reed gave a genuine smile. Go on.
Every species in the galaxy builds permanent solutions. We iterate until perfect and then implement. Humans, you implement good enough and keep iterating forever. The duct tape isn't a failure of engineering, it's engineering that assumes failure.
And why would that be of an advantage? Crickstar's tentacles unnodded, re-nodded, and formed something like understanding.
Because perfect solutions break perfectly. Good enough solutions blend.
Reed raised his probably sandwich in salute. Now you're thinking like a human.
Is that why humans are always saying, it is what it is?
No. That's just us acknowledging that the universe is absurd and we are too tired to argue. Reed took a bite. Several students flinched. But you're on the right track. Now, Reed announced, we're going to talk about some things humans invented that no other species has replicated. Not because you can't, but because you won't. He wrote on the board. Fiction. Every species tells stories. History, instruction, communication. But humans are the only species that tells lies on purpose for fun.
That's not technique,
Thicol protested, tentacles writhing.
the Marlanti have recreational deception that...
The Marlanti lie to each other. Humans lie to themselves. We create entire universes that don't exist, populate them with people who never were, and feel the real emotions about fake events. We have monetized imagination. We have built entire industries on things that are explicitly not true. He pulled up examples. Books, movies, games, billions of hours of human effort dedicated to creating things that never happened.
Why?
Zayla asked. She'd been quieter lately, more thoughtful.
What is the evolutionary advantage of believing lies?
Practice, Reed said simply. Every story is a simulation. Every fiction is a test run. We tell stories about apocalypses so that we're ready when they come. We imagine aliens first, so first contact doesn't break our brains. We create heroes so that we know what to do when we need to be one.
That's actually brilliant,
Someone whispered. It's more than that. Reed pulled up a map, not of space, of Earth, covered in dots. Every dot is a uniquely human story, a myth, a legend, a fiction that shaped reality. We don't just tell stories, we become them. He clicked. The dots connected, formed a web that covered the globe. This is why you can't predict us. We're not running on instinct or logic, we are running on narrative. And we can rewrite our stories whenever we want. The silence that followed was different. Not shocked, not afraid, thoughtful.
So, when humans say fake it till you make it,
Melgris began. We're literally rewriting reality through applied fiction. Reed nodded. We tell ourselves we're brave until we are. We pretend we're smart until we figure it out. We act like we belong until everybody else believes it too.
that's terrifying,
Schvel said. That's human, Reed corrected. And now you know why we survived. Not because we're the strongest or the smartest or the fastest, but because we're the only species that can look at reality and say, nah, I could tell a better story than this. He paused, let it sink in, and then make it true. The last day arrived like a diagnosis. Inevitable, but still somehow surprising. The hall that had once echoed with laughter now held the kind of silence usually reserved for libraries and crime scenes. Reed walked in carrying the same battered duffel bag from the first day. Same duct tape. Same impossible dust. But the 912 students watching him enter weren't the same at all. He sat on the desk. No jerky, no coffee, no props. Just him and the alien students who'd spent a semester learning they'd been wrong about everything. Final lesson, he said. Who wants to tell me what you've learned? For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then, like a dam breaking, everyone tried to answer at once. Quickstar raised a tentacle.
that humans are certifiably insane but too stubborn to notice?
Laughter. Real this time. Warm. The kind that included rather than excluded. Close. Read aloud. Anyone else?
That human development is based on failing upward.
This was from Aurelian, who'd molted twice from stress and grown back feathers in entirely new colors. Warmer? That humans weaponized evolution itself. A Gravari, moss now showing patterns that look suspiciously like duct tape. Getting there? Zayla stood.
That humans survived not despite their contradictions, but because of them. That chaos isn't the opposite of order. It's the raw material order is made from.
Reed said nothing. The silence stretched like taffy in a gravity well. Wrong, he said finally. The room deflated like a punctured spacesuit. All of you, completely, magnificently wrong. He stood, walking to the board where his first words still remained. Cognitive apex. Picked up his marker. You haven't learned anything about humans. He erased the board with his sleeve, leaving smudges that looked like cave paintings. You've learned about yourselves. Every reaction, every protest, every moment of disbelief. That wasn't about us. That was about you. He wrote, stories. You want to understand humans? You gotta stop studying our wars. Stop analyzing our contradictions. Stop trying to solve us like we're an equation that doesn't balance. He turned, faced them. Every species in this room evolved from something. You evolved from predators, from prey, from flora, from concepts I cannot pronounce. But you all evolved from survival. Humans, we evolved from stories. We told ourselves we could be better, and then we beat reality into submission until it agreed.
That is not how evolution...
Someone started. Works? Reed laughed. Sounded like gravel in a tumble dryer.
Tell that to the species that looked at the ocean and thought, boat.
Tell that to the idiots who saw birds and built wings. Tell that to the lunatics who looked at the stars and said, I'll bet we could walk on those. He reached into his bag, pulled out a stack of papers, real papers. The sound of shuffling filled the room like ancient music. Your final assessment. Write a new chapter for the syllabus. Title, Why You Should Be Grateful We're Peaceful Now.
No,
Melgris ventured.
as opposed to when?
Reeds grinned. It was the kind of expression that made you understand why humans had a word for gallows humor. As opposed to when we get bored. Peaceful humans build civilizations. Bored humans build everything else. The Manhattan Project, bored physicists. Social media, bored academics. Duct tape, bored engineer with a deadline. He started handing out the papers. Actually walking to each student. Making contact. Several flinched. Some didn't. 1,000 words, due next week. As students filed down, murmuring in 50 languages about the assignment, Zayla lingered. So did a few others.
Professor? That's first day. You said we were all wrong about humans. Why were we?
Reed packed his duffel. Same one from that first day. Held together with tape and determination and probably some form of prayer to a god humans invented for the sole purpose of having someone to blame. You thought humans were a joke species. Primitive, violent, stupid.
And you weren't?
Oh, we absolutely are. He slung the bag over his shoulders. The mistake was just thinking that those were weaknesses. Every species in the galaxy evolved past their nature. Humans? We weaponized ours.
So the real lesson was...
that the most dangerous species in the galaxy isn't the one with the biggest guns or the best tech or the oldest civilization. He headed for the door. It's the one that can look at all of that and think, I wonder what happens when I press this button.
And humans are that species?
Reed paused at the threshold, looked back. Kid, we invented the button just so we'd have something to press. We put warnings on things to make them more attractive. We have a saying, hold my beer and watch this. It's killed more humans than some plagues. We keep saying it.
Why?
Because the alternative is worse.
Which is?
Never finding out what happens next. The doors squealed shut behind him, leaving Zayla and the others alone with echoes and understanding. Outside, they could hear him whistling something. It sounded like Silent Night, but played in a minor key. Later, when the final papers came in, Reed would read many different versions of the same revelation. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their bodies or even their impossible survival rate. It was that they'd looked at a universe full of species trying to transcend their nature and said, no thanks, we'll make our nature transcendent instead. Watch this, hold my beer. And somewhere in the faculty lounge, surrounded by essays written in languages he couldn't pronounce, and ideas he'd seeded like cognitive landmines, Professor Dalton Reed would crack open a beer. Good old fermented grain water, and read his favorite passages aloud to nobody in particular. From Zayla.
Humans don't solve problems, they survive them. The difference is that solving implies understanding. Surviving only requires stubbornness.
From Crickstar.
I used to think that duct tape was primitive. Now I realize it's a philosophy. This will hold for now is more honest than this will last forever.
From Chevelle.
Humans, they feel fear and do things anyway. My species eliminated fear. We also eliminated courage. I'm beginning to think that we got the worst deal.
From Melgris.
The human species should come with a warning label. Contents under pressure do not shake. Do not expose to boredom. In case of existential crisis, they make it everyone's problem.
Reed would smile at that one. Frame it, maybe. Right next to his collection of student complaints and his degree from a university that technically didn't exist, because it had been bombed, rebuilt, turned into a shopping mall, reclaimed as a school, and then uploaded to the cloud when Earth went digital. The next morning, a new professor would arrive to teach advanced xenocultural studies. They'd find a note on the board, written in Reed's jagged handwriting. They're ready for the truth now. Try not to break them. P.S. If someone asks about the duct tape, just smile. They'll understand eventually. P.P.S. The coffee machine's broken. I fixed it with duct tape. You're welcome. And in halls across the galaxy, former students would carry forward the most dangerous lesson of all. That humans weren't special because they were better. They were special because they refused to be anything else. The universe, for once, had no comment. It was too busy watching to see what humans would do next.